What's up, everybody? Happy Friday and welcome to the Trade to Black podcast. It's been a busy week so far. I know that a lot of people were, let down about the DNC without the mentioning of cannabis. Really don't think it's that big of a deal. Hold on one second. Sorry, I've got a bunch of tabs popped up and I was getting sound in my ears from a bunch of different things. So the DNC, I know that some people were let down. I really don't think it was that big of a deal. It's still on the platform. We've got rescheduling coming down the pipe. And it's been a big 24 hours for Florida. We've got news on Amendment 3. We've got Kim Rivers joining us today. The Cannabist divested of their assets, which we'll get into later on the show. Cansortium had their earnings last night. And then we saw AYR Wellness announce 2 retail locations today. So I guess without further ado, Arns, let's bring up Kim so we can dive into 3. How are you doing, Kim?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. A little bit of a technical difficulty there, but running the ship without Chad all week, so figuring out some kinks. But good to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here.
So I guess let's take it off the top. Amendment 3. I'm on social media a lot. We've seen a lot of, I would say, misconceptions around what it's actually going to go. The biggest issue but the biggest, talking point that I've seen this week is home grow. We've talked about it before. You were vocal about it. You said you were for home grow. We understood how things go within the Florida legislature. Single-use amendment usually bodes well for getting out of the Supreme Court. From a patient standpoint, are you hearing anything on the ground for where patients are coming out and saying, well, 3 doesn't include home grow, but if you want to eventually reach the goal of accessibility for the plant, decriminalize the plant, Amendment 3 does push that forward. So I guess what are you hearing and what are your views on it as it relates to that?
Yeah, I think that, look, it is really important for folks to understand the facts. And, there's noise that can happen because other states have different requirements for their ballot initiatives. That varies. It's state constitution driven. So it varies state by state. In Florida, it is a very strict single subject construction. And in the past, the Supreme Court has actually struck down adult use initiatives because they also included a home grow element. So we knew that it absolutely was a non-starter for this court specifically, that they would not approve language that had both legalization for adults and home grow. So the court has made it very clear that in the state of Florida, under the current court, that it is one or the other. And so there's a sequencing, and I've talked about that in the past. And look, the governor is very well aware of the court's requirements here. And the Supreme Court actually laid out a roadmap, again, specifically on this topic that we followed, which is the only reason I believe that candidly we're on the ballot, and that Floridians finally have an opportunity to vote on adult use. It's been before the court multiple times, and this is the first time that the language has actually been approved to be on the ballot. So, I'm hearing that, folks, and look, I don't think that these are folks who are well-intentioned generally. I think these are folks who are trying to cause confusion among voters and are throwing bombs and saying and acting like this was a choice that we had and that we purposefully or intentionally did not include home grow for some reason or the other, which is absolutely unequivocally false. As folks know, I have been, and Trulieve has been, a huge supporter of home grow for many, many years. This is not something that is a newly developed stance for us. We've been very vocal about supporting home grow and believe that folks should have the ability to grow, particularly medical patients, their own medicine for personal use. We have participated in markets where homegrown is allowed and actually sell clones in those markets. So it's not a question of where we are on the issue. It is a question of how we get this done in the state of Florida. And so step 1 is very critical that we allow for adults who are 21 and up to have the ability to possess, use, and purchase cannabis for personal consumption. What Amendment 3 does is it stops the madness of arrests happening in the state of Florida, which happen every single day and disproportionately affect our minority communities across the state. We know that. We know that targeting exists. I mean, I think we all agree that that needs to come to a stop. And so that's really one of the main crux points of Amendment 3. Once we, as I call it, stop the madness, then we can have and will have additional conversations. And look, home grow, candidly, can take two paths. It can happen in the legislature, or it can happen in another citizen initiative. But again, the adult use legalization needs to happen as a precursor to then allow for, again, home grow to come in as a step two.
Yeah, that's a very sensible way to put it. And I mean, it's kind of, I think, the way that calmer heads will prevail as we kind of go through the process as it relates to, or go ahead.
No, I just was going to say, and I mean, look, I mean, in terms of chatter, and when you kind of separate out sort of the folks that are trying to gaslight versus real conversation, you know, I think Reddit's a great source there, and some other channels. Folks are getting it. I would say that, you know, folks even that had questions in the beginning are starting to understand as they absorb kind of the reality of what we have to do in the state of Florida. And we're getting actually more and more positive responses. And I mean, the back and forth with, you know, the governor's spokesperson this week was just another opportunity from my lens to point out some of the hypocrisy and also some of the challenges that we have in making sure that, again, folks know the facts, and that, you know, the law isn't misconstrued, and that the facts aren't misconstrued, and that voters really have, you know, the real truth, so they can make their own decision when it comes to November.
As it relates, and I saw that back and forth this week, I was engaged in it as well. We see a lot of talking points against Amendment 3 that just aren't common sense driven. They all have counterpoints that are sitting out in the open right now as it stands. I mean, one powerful ally that we brought into the fold was Joe Gruters, the ex-chair of the Republican Party of Florida. He's brought, I don't know how to really frame it, companion or sidecar legislation that will follow 3 if and when it passes to effectively ban public consumption. One of Governor DeSantis's main talking points is, well, with Amendment, and he continues this talking point, with Amendment 3, you're going to have people smoking weed on the beach, in schools, on roads, everywhere. It's going to create reefer madness. Is there dialogue with his office, or is there dialogue within the current Republican Party of Florida to acknowledge that this bill has been drafted and it will go through with Amendment 3 to combat public consumption and put a lid on it?
Well, I mean, certainly we are continuing conversations with leadership and legislators across the state of Florida on both sides of the aisle. And we've done that over the years. I know many of my colleagues are doing that as well. And in those meetings, there absolutely is agreement, and again, uniform agreement, that absolutely the legislature will be passing an implementing bill. And in that implementing bill, there will be common sense regulation, which we are supportive of, and I think that the industry in general is supportive of. And one of those points, of course, is the ban on public consumption. Look, that's the state of the law currently in Florida as it relates to medical marijuana. Candidly, it's the state of the law as it relates to smoking nicotine products. And so that is, I think, what the public expects. It's certainly what we would expect here. And Florida is going to have a robust regulatory structure that is, I think, common sense, and that is very consumer and patient focused. That we're making sure that folks can rely on the products that they're getting. Age gating is a very serious and real requirement here, that this is meant for adults who are 21 and up, and that we're going to ensure that the products that folks are getting are absolutely the products that they expect to get. And so, you know, that's part of having a robust, regulated, above board marketplace that's differentiated, candidly, from the illicit marketplace. And so, which is what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to transition folks off the street and into a safe and regulated market.
Speaking of the safe and regulated market, hemp. I mean, I see it all over Fort Lauderdale and South Florida. It's become a national issue, especially as it relates to its relationship with the cannabis industry. I mean, you're one of the leading CEOs in the space, both in Florida and in Washington, D.C. Is there dialogue, or is there active dialogue that's currently happening with how we kind of either come together or figure out how to put this genie back, not back in the bottle, but regulate it like cannabis, sensible regulation that's going to take it out of gas stations and take it out of liquor stores that don't necessarily have the same stringent protocols as a cannabis dispensary? Because just from this is obviously anecdotal, but from my firsthand accounts, when I was younger, obtaining alcohol and buying alcohol with a fake ID was relatively easy. I would never dream to go into a cannabis dispensary with a fake ID. You can't pretty much bypass those protocols. Like, is there active dialogue, or is there any sort of light at the end of the tunnel that you're seeing to where we kind of come together and figure out how to make this work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, it's certainly the technology and where technology has gone, right, as it relates to age gating has certainly changed, right, since you and I were younger, and kind of the age of fake IDs, if you will. Now there's technology that you're allowed, you can actually scan and do active ID scans and verification. So, I think that is, important, again, because I do think that real and true age gating, as we talk about a regulated marketplace, is super critical. Listen, I'm in the regulated cannabis space. I'm not in the hemp space. I do know that obviously there's active dialogue at the federal level that will continue as the Farm Bill continues to make its way through. I think that, folks, because look, that industry has exploded. And so anytime you have, kind of that unfettered growth, there of course is going to be additional conversation around it, and questions that are asked around, what are the regulations? How is this industry operating as a safe and good player within the broader landscape? And listen, I think that there are some really good, responsible folks in that industry as well who would welcome regulation, and who echo some of my comments, and I think some of our industry comments around wanting clear guidelines and making sure that there is truth in labeling, that there is traceability, that there is valid lab testing in the space. And so, I think that unfortunately, like in any industry, there are some bad actors, and that is not good for any of us, candidly. But I do think that those conversations are gonna reach ahead at some point. And I think that at the federal level, for sure, folks are starting to take more notice. And then I think, as in the current landscape, it's a state by state conversation that, again, there are a lot of states that are having that conversation as well, and that are trying to set, responsible parameters for operators.
And then as it relates to 3, I mean, we're obviously always fixated on the polling data. It's ebbing and flowing. Is there anything you can share with us in terms of the numbers, as for what you've seen as of recent, or is it pretty much pacing at those same numbers that we've seen, let's say, in weeks past?
Yeah, look, I continue to be encouraged by the trends. So I don't get necessarily as caught up in the numbers as I do the trends and the trend lines that we see, and particularly, trends and how they respond to moves that are being made within the campaign, right? Where investment dollars are going, how those are resonating with voters. And when we talk to voters, before and after, and, take their temperature, are they responding positively? And are they moving in the right direction? And so that absolutely, I'm very, comfortable with the strategy that the campaign has laid out, and how we're progressing. Look, the last 60 days are where the fight happens. After Labor Day, the gloves come off in any campaign cycle. So, we're going to start to see a lot more. I would expect or anticipate. Certainly from the opposition, but also from the Smart and Safe campaign as well. And I think that it's been very important to set the table with voters in Florida and raise awareness so they understand what Amendment 3 does, and they've got that backdrop going into what's going to be certainly a heightened news cycle, if you will, on this issue along with others.
Any indication on how Donald Trump potentially could talk about 3? Anything you're hearing from anybody? I know that was a big statement that he made. He went straight to Florida when he was asked about cannabis. I know it's his home state. He's going to have to vote on the ballot. it's kind of like, I don't think he holds so much weight nationally as it relates to the issue, but with his home state with 3, it's kind of, I don't want to say people are on pins and needles because we're really not, but anything you've heard there?
I mean, look, I think it's a great, testament to the campaign that he knew about 3. He was aware of what was going on right there. Hopefully he's seen some of our ads, and is following the issue, right? I think that, it's encouraging, to have former president and presidential candidate, speak about the issue, just as it relates to consciousness and awareness. And listen, I've said this, and I will continue to say it. I think that, this is not, and you've heard me say this is not a partisan issue. It's a human issue. But I will say that folks are very interested and want to make sure that folks that are elected, have some policy. We're getting to that point now, right? It was all fun and games to talk about cannabis from a populist perspective, the last 2 election cycles. But I think at this point, right, with cannabis as prevalent as it is, and with states who have, we have, half of the United States with, adult use right on the books, more than half with medical programs on the books. So we're at that tipping point where it starts to move from a populist issue, and my hope is that we're now moving into the policy realm. And so with that, right, and you start to see folks wanting more accountability from our elected leaders on actual action and not just talk. And so I think indicators around where both candidates are going to be as it relates to cannabis policy at the federal level, that is more concrete and more actionable, is something that we as an industry, I think, are at the point where we're beginning to effectively push for that. And more importantly, maybe people, right? The voters are asking those questions as the kind of checkerboard nature of this comes into more specific focus, with the majority of Americans having access across the U.S.
And then getting into I know we talk a lot about 3, but you've got a hell of a business with Trulieve. On the back of 3 passing, you've brought some premium brands into Florida. Alien Labs, Connected. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Khalifa Kush was announced, and that's live in Florida. How do you see the market progressing on the back of adult use passing? Do you see any sort of change in the product mix? Are you forecasting any sort of change in, let's say, consumer habits? Or is it just going to be simply more accessibility and obviously higher numbers as the TAM greatly increases with adult use coming online?
Yeah, so we've had Khalifa Kush in Florida for a little while. So shout out to our KK partners. It's one of our we just did a relaunch, or I think a launch of a new strain in Florida, but it's good to know that it caught your eye for sure. Yeah. I would say that some of that's going to depend on where the legislature lands, right? I do think it's critical for us to maintain product availability for our medical patients. That is something that I am very, very passionate about. And I think that, the legislature will be very focused on that as well, as they should be. We set up a program for those people, and there's, almost 1 million Floridians that rely on products week in and week out. And we need to make sure that we continue to serve their needs. In addition to that, though, of course, there'll be, additional consumers in the market. I would not be surprised if we saw some product differentiation. Arizona is a model for that, where we have certain products that are available on the medical side that aren't necessarily available on the adult use side. Typical trends, right, that you see in a conversion market is an increase in in, I'll call it sort of easy to use products. So when we think about, right, our all-in-ones, when we think about our pre-rolls, when we think about our edibles. And again, some of that's going to be determined by the legislature and what works there. But we're really excited to be able to serve an increased consumer base. And again, as we think about adults over the age of 21 being able to make the choice, right, and that responsible choice, and perhaps pivot away from alcohol and other substances that we know are significantly more harmful.
And then with the potential success in Florida with Amendment 3, you're also in Georgia and an early mover in that state. Do you think that adult use in Florida could catalyze cannabis movement throughout the Southeast, starting to get the Carolinas, Kentucky, Louisiana, I know, is starting to make strides, but really start to activate this corridor, because there's a massive market down here as it relates to cannabis products, but there's not a lot of programs that have efficiently been able to roll out so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've always said, right, that we believe that the Southeast is, is a market and an area that we've been focused on, for sure. And I think that Florida has the ability to roll out a program that, again, is common sense, and that is a model for southern states to look to and say, oh, okay, the sky didn't fall. Actually, the things that they said were going to happen actually materialized, and it's a positive. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue that's being generated and poured back into our local communities. And wow, that's something that that may make sense, because in particular, a lot of those states that you mentioned do have medical programs similar to Florida. And again, I think that sequencing, and we talk about that a lot, and that incremental change, especially for maybe more conservative leaning states, is, I think, critical in terms of getting policymakers to the point where, because it's not necessarily about the people, right? It's about the policymakers and their ability to reflect the will of the people. And so getting folks comfortable that it is the right next step.
And you said, I guess on a closing note, you'd said after Labor Day really is when we start to really hit the pavement. Anything we should be expecting, or any kind of big splashes maybe coming for the Smart and Safe campaign?
Stay tuned. I mean, I think we've got, and the team's done such an amazing job. And look, it's just a testament as well that Florida's ready. I'm always thrilled to hear about all the different endorsements that have rolled in, all the different positive sentiment that continues to sort of add to our incredible momentum with the campaign. Truly, we've been giving out yard signs at our stores and bumper stickers. They're like literally running out every time we restock. So tens of thousands of yard signs have been deployed. Other partners across the state, other MMTCs in Florida are participating as well, which is wonderful to see. Other individuals. So I will say, just a plug, the campaign is going to be launching a kind of a micro donor site, just to encourage folks to, and it's a small dollar ask, but just to encourage folks to put their name behind the effort, because we really want to show that this is in fact a movement of the people, and that the people are with us. And so I would just say, make sure you're signed up for emails, and please, if you are able to donate, we would certainly appreciate it. And it's as much about, really adding your name to the roll in support in a meaningful way, as it is the actual financial contribution. And so that'll be a really important thing for us. But, again, and I think it's important to note that the support that we're getting is across the board. It's from teachers to law enforcement to elected officials to folks that are, that lives have been impacted or affected positively by the plant. So it really is a wide array. And I say all the time that, again, this is a movement, and it's just wonderful to be a part of.
I know we're both Seminoles. Any plans for the game this weekend?
Oh my gosh, we're gonna it's game weekend. I'm so excited to see the Noles play tomorrow. I hate that I'm not there, but I know that we are going to be victorious. And it's great to it's going to be great to see Osceola plant the spear for the first time this season. Go Noles! Yeah,
definitely. And I know we actually have Shad in the question, so I mean, if you have a couple of more minutes, I'd love to get your take on this.
Sure.
I mean, what do you think you've learned most during this whole political season about the current state of the industry? Anything that's grabbed your attention?
Oh gosh, there are so many. That could be like probably a whole nother, ask me again in another 2 months. But I think that really, and look, it's been super fascinating to me. I've been able to listen in on focus groups and just really, again, get the ground feedback. And I think that the one thing that has really struck me is that it's time, right? And when we talk to people, we get a lot of head nods. Like, everyone knows, I mean, cannabis is here, right? It is part of our lives. And it's just this common sense approach that of most Floridians anyway, and I think most Americans, that it's here, right? We just need to do common sense regulation, make sure folks have access to it, make sure that it's quality controlled, make sure that it's it's age gated, right? And reinvest these dollars back into our community in a rational way. And I think it's not kind of this glaring aha, but it's that crosses all ages, all genders, all political affiliations, and really just reinforces that that folks are ready for reform.
Yeah. I mean, it absolutely frustrates me from time to time that the only people that aren't looking at this from a common sense perspective are most of the ones that we need to, being the ones up in Washington, et cetera.
I'll tell you on that. I think that's going to change here as well. Again, I think we're on the cusp of a tipping point. And and we've always said this, right? I mean, listen, I'm as impatient as the next person. That's part of my DNA here as well. But, again, as the majority of Americans have access, as this becomes, and we're all nodding and saying cannabis is here, right? As folks that are coming into Congress, election cycle after election cycle, are hearing from their constituents that, hey, this just passed in Florida, this just passed in North Dakota, South Dakota, right? Like this is happening. I do think that at some point there will be that next step that begins to happen in Congress. And it's not going to be overnight as much as we would like for it to be. It will be incremental, I believe. And, we just need to make sure that we're there to take full advantage of those opportunities as they present themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to close on. Kim, thank you. As always, thank you for your time. And thank you. Look forward to seeing you very soon and having you back on the podcast in the coming weeks, hopefully.
Don't forget, yes on 3. Thanks, Sean.
Don't forget about it. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye. Well, that was great. Obviously very bullish on Amendment 3. I think it's very important to be looking at Amendment 3 from an objective standpoint and looking at it from a common sense standpoint, which I think most of us are, with the exception of a lot of the lawmakers that are not a lot of the lawmakers, some of the lawmakers that are in Florida. But with that, let's get into the headlines. Like I said, we've had a bunch of stuff on Florida so far in the last 24 hours. And one of them that was great to see was the Cannabis closing on their Florida operations. This transaction was $16.4 million total in consideration. They sold their 14 retail dispensaries, 2 of their cultivation and processing facilities, and then the license that they owned to Mint Cannabis. Mint Cannabis is currently a private MSO that operates predominantly in Arizona. I think they also have locations in Missouri and Michigan. They're going to come into the state via this transaction. And then the Cannabist is selling sold their Lakeland facility as well within the press release to an undisclosed multi-state operator as well in the transaction. And the Cannabist also retains a paper license. So they do still have a card to play as far as a cash contribution, an additional cash contribution that they might get from that transaction. It's yet to be determined whether they'll hold on to the license for potential future if we do flip to adult use, or they do decide to sell the license for cash consideration. I've reached out to Jesse Channon, working to get him on the show on Monday or Wednesday of next week, and we'll have him on for further comment as it relates to this deal. But they're doing what they're saying. They said they were going to right-size the footprint. The Florida assets were going to get jettisoned off. They were going to do the deal with Verano, with the Virginia, as well as the Arizona assets. Those have both closed this week with haste, which is a great thing to see, because that means that these assets obviously didn't have a lot of hair on them. Transactions went through, they're closing, and now the Cannabist is off for the better. They also now have that Verano position on their balance sheet, which I think we're going to have to look through the 8K or one of the formal filings to get the actual to get the actual terms of what the paper looks like. But that's something you could definitely call a AAA asset on their balance sheet moving forward. Cansortium reported earnings yesterday. They're tracking at about $100 million run rate in the state of Florida. What is why is Florida not worth the growth? I don't know what Whoops first talking about. I'll get to that afterwards. Cansortium, $100 million run rate. They've got the transaction with Riv Capital currently in the process of closing. Cansortium is one of the undersung heroes of Florida. They're doing well. They're growing. Pretty sure this quarter was 12% growth quarter over quarter from a top line standpoint. They're one of the undervalued players in this space. I know Pennsylvania, as per the earnings report, they also grew their retail location, and then also in Texas, they have those assets that are sitting there. So overall, how would you best describe CTS moves they made over the last 4 to 5 weeks? They're great. I think I just kind of went over that with both closings of the transactions. The management team doing what they actually said they were going to do, and I think that's a very important thing. If a management team tells you they're going to do something and they do it, whether you like it or not, I mean, I kind of have to give them merit. I mean, as it shows that they're executing and they're doing what they said they were going to do. And I mean, David and Jesse are doing a pretty damn good job since they took over from Nick. As far as Cansortium goes, we've reached out to their team to potentially have Robert on the podcast next week to go dive deeper into that, as well as get their take on what timelines look like for actually closing the transaction as it relates to the Cansortium Riv Capital merger, which I, as well as I think most people, do think that is going to be a big net positive for the business and transformational. AYR this morning had other Florida news. They added 2 dispensaries to their footprint, which forget which they're in. It's either in Jacksonville, I think it's in Jacksonville and Palm Beach that they had opened. Hold on a second. Jacksonville and Palm Beach Gardens. So, I mean, this just strengthens their footprint. This adds to what David had told us a couple of weeks back when we had him on for earnings. They are going to grow this footprint going into adult use in Florida. They're also working hard on getting that indoor grow facility online. So it's execution again from the AYR team in Florida. Do I think Florida will adapt to a recreational market? You go from a medical setting to a service setting with so many options. Yes. I mean, I do think that Florida is going to be big for a lot of the operators that are there. That being said, I don't think the Florida adult use market raises all boats. I think that you're going to see the cream rise to the top, the cream mostly that's at the top right now. And maybe a couple of players aren't able to compete on price and compete on competition moving forward. So I don't expect this to be a rising tide lifts all boats scenario in the state of Florida. That being said, there are some smaller players that need to be taken very seriously in the state of Florida, such as Sunburn and Flowery. They are higher end premium brand operators in the space. They both grow some of the best flower that I've seen in the space. And I think adult use bodes very well for them. Some of what I'll call the middle market operators in the state of Florida that sit probably within the middle third of the stack, some of them might be in trouble. Some of them have stagnated sales. Some of them aren't really resonating with the consumer. They're just selling cannabis right now to patients as they happen to be geographically located in areas that they're able to capture that market share. I think that can drastically change in an adult use market. And like I said, the big boys that are sitting at the top, they're going to be tremendously more powerful in terms of pricing power, as well as capturing market share within the consumer and deploying marketing dollars within the state of Florida. So I do think that you are going to see the landscape of the Florida market change considerably. And that is actually what happened in Arizona. You're seeing the prime players able to compete. You saw people exit the market. You've seen assets trade in the market. And I mean, it's just going to be the general evolution. So rise in Florida. Let me preface this by saying GTI is the best in class company in the industry, period. They make money on a per share basis. They pay their taxes. They have fantastic operations. GTI is the top of the cone if you want to talk about quality of assets in the space. Their flower in Florida, from what I've heard, has a lot to be desired. That being said, I don't think Ben is going to turn a blind eye to the state of Florida. I think that he's probably been more focused elsewhere, as you can see in their operations and you can see in their profitability throughout the footprint. I don't like Rise as it stands today within the Florida market. That's not any condemnation on their business whatsoever. They will be a formidable player in the Florida market come adult use or on the back of adult use. They're not going to go anywhere. It's GTI. If we're being completely honest. I think with that being said, let's bring Guap up here, as we got a couple of more things to dive into, and then give it a wrap going into the weekend. What's going on, my man?
Greetings. Nice job this week. I know we were out without the smooth stylings of Shad and the pro voice, but you did a I know I'm biased because I was on the show on Monday, but Gores was awesome. Jason on Tuesday, Hirsch on Wednesday with the Pot Daddy shirt, and now another nice interview with Kim, really explaining things. I think you did a great job.
Yeah, it's a kind of growing pains. Nobody actually knows that's watching the stream right now, but as soon as Kim popped up, I kind of panicked because I was getting the sound in my ears from like 3 different tabs. I almost closed the tab that the live stream was streaming through and took myself out of the show. And luckily, Google Chrome had the box pop up and said, "Are you sure you want to exit this tab?" I was like, "No." Found the tabs and then got on with my way. But yeah. It's a growing pains and learning steps. So, I mean, I guess kind of what we wanted to dive into before we get to mic drop. I mean, Cannabis Twitter was probably one of the more vitriol-laden places I've seen in a while. Yesterday, we had a lot of people with a lot of, I guess, shit to say. A lot of people disinterested with the fact that the DNC didn't highlight cannabis. What was your take? I mean, I think that it really wasn't that important. I think that we have things that are moving regardless. I was vocal on that. Some people said I might have had Stockholm syndrome. I thought I was kind of just being real, giving kudos to the Democratic Party as they've actually created progress. So, I mean, what's your take on it?
Look, the process is in process. It didn't change anything. I would have liked to hear something about cannabis at the DNC. I find the DNC and the RNC, quite frankly, to be pretty tough to watch. I'd much rather read a description of policies and how they're going to pay for anything than sort of pumping up the base, which is what it always feels like. This one more than ever felt a bit theatrical. The Beyonce rumor definitely had a lot of people tuning in, I think. But yeah, ultimately, in cannabis being mentioned at the DNC doesn't change the fact that Schedule 3 could be rescheduled or not. I think we're all a little wary of politicians and their promises when it comes to cannabis, and for good reason. So it's one of those wait and see, let the whole process play out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Kim nailed it. You are going to see campaigns, whether they're on the state level or on the federal level, basically hit their stride and go into turbo mode after Labor Day. Kamala and the administration is going to have to start to elaborate on their platform and on their policy. The DNC was not that space. The DNC, I'm not saying this from a political bias, but it was a Trump bashing, and it was just a love fest for the Democratic Party, whether you want to say it or not. That, the RNC, I had my qualms about both. You had Kid Rock at the RNC, which I thought was just completely distasteful. And then you had Lil Jon during the roll call pumping everybody up.
Awesome.
I think it's a nothing burger. I do think that we are going to hear about the cannabis stance from the Harris administration within the next month. That could be coinciding with some sort of final ruling hitting the register. That's pure speculation, but that's really what facts would tell you and what the writing on the wall is. And she is going to start to dive deep into the policy and the platform that they are potentially going to put forth if they win the election. The DNC wasn't the time to do that. Could they have had somebody that they expunged their record, or someone that they pardoned, and come up to speak about criminal justice reform the way that they did gun violence? Sure. Should they have? Yes. Am I at odds with them because they didn't? No. I don't really think it was that big of a deal, and life goes on, and the tape is green today. So let's see what the next couple of weeks look like.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
With that being said,
in the comments, and he's saying exactly what I was thinking too. It's like watch other DNCs. It's a lot of empty promises and blaming and complaining, and I'm all about substance and results. I think a lot of people are. So rally the base, get them hyped, is what it's all about. So expect more Little John appearances and stuff like that. That's definitely one way to do it. Keep the eyeballs on, keep the ratings up, and
that's for sure.
Keep the division divided, which is really what I want to talk about next.
Yeah. So with that being said, Arns, let's take us into mic drop and give my man the floor.
Yeah, let's turn the volume down on that music down just a little bit, Arns. So I think we've all struggled to understand why cannabis is still illegal given the popularity of the issue. It's got political value. There's overwhelming scientific evidence, so that would be a big public health win. And the potential tax revenue is massive still, and which is really important for a country that spends twice as much as it takes in with taxes, right? So we all know, and I've talked about the origins of the war on drugs being rooted in, sort of Nixon's administration wanting to suppress the anti-war movement, suppress the Black and brown communities. But I'm not convinced that that's really the reason that cannabis is still illegal. I don't think that, and I agree with Kim, this is a movement. Yeah. And I had time, on vacation to really think about why is cannabis really illegal? And I know everyone wants to say it's about the money, and I think that's true, but I want to get into it a little bit. So I really believe that, and this is as a result of getting inundated by all the politics stuff right now. So I don't get really political very often. And I certainly I'm not a partisan hack, everyone knows, but I really believe this is about dividing and ruling the people. Oppressors divide and isolate oppressed people to prevent them from organizing together for liberation. This creates rifts among different groups of oppressed people and discourages them from dialogue. This is the game plan. It's working. Right. And it's working better than ever, I would say. The media helps amplify it. It's not about right and wrong. It's really about if you keep the people divided and you keep them fighting amongst each other about anything, like whatever will drive a wedge between the two sides. The sides I see is an elite ruling class and the rest of us. And so I don't, if everyone, I don't know, smoked a joint and sat around a campfire and actually talked about this stuff, you would find you have a tremendous amount of common ground, which has been my experience growing up in New England and living in the South for the last 20 years. You really, once you actually talk to people and less about the media playing us and the politicians playing us against each other, you realize that we're really have a lot of common ground. Yes. I do think it's about money. I think it hurts alcohol and pharma sales, and hemp sales, so you see those lobbies spending the money. And I do think it is about sort of generational stance, like Kim was talking about, Anthony, you've talked about it. It's sort of like what you grew up with becomes sort of ingrained, and it's very hard to change your stance on something. But if I could get a little more woo-woo about it, I think it's because cannabis is a great unifier. The government doesn't want to legalize plants because it promotes a sense of oneness, which works counter to their plan to divide us. It's far easier to keep us angry on alcohol and placated on big pharma's opioids, right? You saw that with the anti-war movement. It's also it creates a population of people that are non-violent, not angry, and not into consumerism, which hurts the bottom line too. So vocal opposition to conflicts would turn up. Less volunteers for the military. People realize it's really important instead of buying their way into happiness. So
you've had all very, very good points.
Yeah.
But I think the elephant in the room is the main reason why cannabis is still illegal because it's Schedule I drug.
Yeah.
On the CSA. I mean, we got to get it off, which we're in the process of. And then we start to, I really do think that's why people are like, well, rescheduling, it brings in big pharma, blah, blah, blah. Rescheduling is the first step to getting the plant legalized, whether you want to like it or not. I mean, that's go ahead.
Yeah, like Hirsch was saying on Wednesday, movements happen with incremental steps. And
Yes,
I truly believe that if you study history of how things happen, it's not by going for the whole enchilada. And so one thing leads to another, leads to another. Florida going rec leads to Georgia, leads to North Carolina. Schedule 3 leads to descheduling. I mean, there's these things cascade. Changing public opinion, the opinion of politicians, it takes time, it takes steps. And I'm really sick of people who have business interests in certain hemp spaces it's disingenuous to try and some of these delay tactics here and fear mongering.
That's on you, Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
Listen to that soundbite.
I mean, I'm really so sick of DeSantis and his stance on everything. Yeah. So, I think, I hate, wow, the guy with the bake hat is going to quote Bob Marley here, but the thing about smoking herb is that plenty of people can think the same way. That's why Babylon doesn't want people to smoke. The more people who smoke herb, the more Babylon falls. And Babylon is referring to sort of I hate to explain Babylon from a Rasta standpoint as the white guy on this show, but it's everything about it's the thing that makes me want to just get in a van and drive away rather than saying stuff like this and standing up for what's right.
Yeah, I mean, if we were doing if we actually stood for what's right and just, cannabis would have been legalized decades ago. I mean,
this isn't about common sense, and I don't necessarily think it's just about money. I feel like I wanted to explore some of the other reasons that, maybe a little bit and energy driven, but it's about keeping us divided.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you on that. I mean, I think I've been pretty outspoken about the roots of cannabis being a Schedule I narcotic from the get-go. Just the way that everything kind of transpired there. I mean, I do firmly believe it was racially motivated, and that generation, unfortunately, because we don't have any term limits within our government, are still running the halls of government for the most part. So, I mean, it's aging out of a generation, and then we can finally get what we want and what actually makes sense. So, I mean, I definitely look forward to getting there.
Yeah, the next 10 years. I mean, look at the progress we've seen the last 10. The next 10, it's gonna be wild to watch it unfold, and I'm looking forward to it. I really didn't think we would be this far along, but at the same time, it's hard not to be disappointed about how little progress has been made until now.
Yeah, it's hard, but you kind of got to stop looking in the rear view and just look ahead as what's going on, what we have the momentum of. And I think Brady put it best. I think it was like about 9 months ago. He's like, for the first time in history, we have the political will of the establishment behind the cannabis industry. That's a very powerful statement. It's very easy and simple. It's a very easy and simple statement. And I mean, that's the reality of the world we're living in right now. We're not living in a system where they're just lying to us and where we're getting the rug pulled out from under us. I mean, there's actual mechanisms being put in place and things that are happening to perpetuate this industry and this plant forward. If you really want to look at it like a cynic, you can go back to Chuck Schumer's been pigeonholing SAFE for years. The Dems have been lying to us. The Dems got the HHS report done, the OLC memo done. We just went through a comment period. There's a final ruling sitting in Washington somewhere that's going to hit the register at some point in time. I call that progress. If that doesn't happen, I'm really wrong, and I will own that at that point in time. But that is where I firmly believe this industry is going. And I think on that, let's call it a weekend.
Wrap it. Yeah, good job, Anthony. Yep. And everyone have a good weekend out there. Don't let all this stuff get to you. They're playing us. They're playing us.
No, I could get jazzed up about the political shit for another 2 hours if we really wanted to just go on a tangent. But no, everybody, it's been real this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Shad will be back on Monday for the regularly scheduled program with Trade to Black, and smash that like button. Take us out, Arns.
Love everybody. Do it.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.